So, everyone's got the image in their mind that making a movie is a fun and exciting time for all involved. But unfortunately, as we've found out from numerous examples, there are times where people just show up to set and absolutely hate their time from start to finish. And that's what we're here to talk about today. This is WhatCulture.com, and these are actors who hated working on their own movies. Katherine Heigl, Knocked Up. Now, to be a little bit reductive, women in Judd Apatow movies don't really get to have a lot of fun. While the men are off getting into scrapes and learning important life lessons, the women, generally wives and girlfriends of said man-children, stand around with folded arms and permanently rolling eyes. They may get a quip or two to disdainfully spit, but that's about it. That was certainly Katherine Heigl's experience working on Knocked Up. Now, the film did a lot for her career, which she has always acknowledged, but she had issues with the character, who she felt was humorless and uptight. It's hard to argue with her here. Knocked Up, like much of Apatow's work, is flabby and loose, but even with its extended runtime, they couldn't even squeeze some funny material in for her character. Heigl didn't waste much time in voicing these views, critiquing the role only a year after release, but things didn't end too well for the actress. After Apatow and co-star Seth Rogen reacted badly to her comments, a sizable backlash hit Heigl, and arguably her career has never really recovered, which kinda makes you think she's got a point about sexism in the industry.
Have you ever wanted to watch your favourite content whilst you're abroad and stay safe online? Well, we have an incredible deal for you. For just $2.50 a month, you can get Norton VPN, an easy-to-use VPN that won't slow you down, allows you to watch your favourite shows from around the world, and keeps your online activity safe and private, all with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Just scan the QR code on screen right now or use the link in the description to get Norton VPN for just $2.50 a month. Now, back to the video.
Jamie Lee Curtis Virus. Few actors are as synonymous with the horror genre as Jamie Lee Curtis. Sure, Curtis has gone on to have major success outside of horror. While those films clearly vary in quality, one picture that Jamie Lee has particular disdain for is her appearance in 1999's Virus. Based on the comic book of the same name, Virus is a sci-fi horror offering based around an alien entity on a mission to turn mankind into a race of cyborg slaves. Despite having an impressive headline cast of Jamie Lee Curtis, Donald Sutherland, and Billy Baldwin, John Bruno's movie was so horrendous that it didn't even make back half of its $75 million budget. As for Curtis's thoughts on Virus, back in 2010 she told WENN via The Express, quote, "That's a piece of shit movie. It's an unbelievably bad movie, just bad from the bottom," end quote. Continuing on, the famed Scream Queen would add, quote, "It was maybe the only time I've known something was just bad and there was nothing I could do about it," end quote.
Tom Holland as Nathan Drake in Uncharted. Ever since he swung into the MCU as Peter Parker, Tom Holland has become one of the biggest names in Hollywood. Aside from playing Spider-Man for Marvel Studios, he's joined the Pixar universe, got his own Apple TV Plus show. His most notorious casting was as Nathan Drake in Sony's Uncharted adaptation. Though the role was originally Mark Wahlberg's, the movie was in development hell for so long and underwent so many changes that Holland was ultimately brought in as a younger version of the iconic character. There are a lot of opinions surrounding his casting, with the majority not exactly being positive, and the actor himself didn't do much to help his cause. Even before the movie released, he was putting his own performance down. Holland told GQ that rather than focusing on actually bringing the character to life, he was more concerned with whether he would look cool. Just as long as you could see his bulging biceps in his action hero shots, right?
Linda Hamilton hated Terminator 2's thumbs up scene. Director Tim Miller stated that he actually hates one of the most iconic moments from Terminator 2, namely the climactic farewell for the T-800 who offers John Connor a thumbs up as he's lowered into the molten steel. Miller said, "I can only say that that was not my favourite part of the movie. Many people love that scene. For me, it's just too sentimental." But because putting his own foot in his mouth wasn't bad enough, he then dragged star Linda Hamilton into the mess by confirming that she also agrees with him. He said, "One of the first things I asked Linda is, how do you feel about the thumbs up moment? And she was like, no. And I went, okay, we're gonna be fine." How nice of him to implicate Linda, as he probably watched his respect from fans evaporate like the famous Nuke City scene, also from Terminator 2. Dev Patel, The Last Airbender. The important thing in life isn't the mistakes that you make, it's the lessons that you learn after it. For Dev Patel, the experience of working on The Last Airbender was so disastrous that he made some pretty important career-altering decisions, which seem to have been working out pretty well for him ever since. Patel, who came up through Channel 4's Skins and the relatively small-scale Oscar-winning Slumdog Millionaire, felt completely overwhelmed by the sheer bigness of this production. The film was beset by controversy from the off, and this did not make for a happy set. Patel later told The Hollywood Reporter that he felt like he wasn't even listened to on set and saw a stranger on the screen that he just couldn't relate to when it came time to seeing the production in full. Patel doesn't assign blame to anyone in particular, but rather chalks this up to experience. When you get involved with a production as big as The Last Airbender, you're just another moving part. Patel has taken the experience to heart and has since devoted his time to smaller and more interesting projects. And if it keeps him away from disasters like The Last Airbender, then it was a lesson well worth learning.
Michael Caine, Jaws: The Revenge. Even the biggest Jaws fans find it tough to defend the atrocity that was Jaws: The Revenge. Swimming to the silver screen in 1987, Joseph Sargent's movie was riddled with ludicrous plot points, overflowing with illogicality, and struggled to muster up as much bite as even the oft-mocked Jaws 3 did. Here, a great white shark stalks Ellen Brody all the way from Amity Island to the shores of the Bahamas. Along the way, we have Michael Caine as a budding love interest for Ellen, after the between-movies death of her husband Martin. And for Caine, he hasn't been shy about how he knew the movie and his own performance were utterly terrible. In a truly iconic response when asked about his turn in Jaws: The Revenge, Caine is believed to have said, quote, "I have never seen it, but by all accounts it is terrible. However, I have seen the house that I built and it is terrific." End quote. Online digging sadly doesn't throw up a precise source for that famed quote, although those sentiments are backed up in Caine's What's It All About biography, where he thanks Jaws: The Revenge for paying for his house and giving him a nice holiday.
Ben Whishaw as Q in No Time to Die. The likes of M and Q have been stalwarts in the James Bond franchise for years, and fans have every right to believe they know everything about them. However, No Time to Die featured an exploration of Q that no other movie had delved into before. In a moment that could have been easily missed, Ben Wishaw's character confirmed that he was expecting a date, with a sentence that suggested he had a boyfriend. However, similar to Josh Gad's feelings about LeFou's sexuality in 2017's Beauty and the Beast remake, and how Disney didn't go far enough in exploring it, Whishaw wasn't entirely happy with how fleeting this moment was. Whishaw told The Guardian that while there were good intentions behind the reveal, he was left disappointed that there wasn't more done with it. Recalling the first time he read the script, he said, "I remember perhaps feeling that was unsatisfying." This was the first character in the James Bond franchise confirmed to be part of the LGBTQ+ community, so it's easy to understand why audiences and Whishaw himself might have considered it too underdeveloped.
Crispin Glover hated Back to the Future's ending. Back to the Future memorably concludes with Marty McFly successfully ensuring that his parents bang and therefore make Marty actually exist. There's more to it than that, but there's the cliff notes. Marty then returns to his altered present of 1985 to see that George is now a wealthy author and a more assertive, confident person, while Lorraine is happy and healthy and his siblings are successful business owners and historical douchebag Biff has finally been put in his place. However, as great an ending as it is, not all of the film's cast were totally on board with it, with Crispin Glover confirming in recent years that he was, well, less than impressed with the film's message of money making people happy, as this changes the moral of the story to wealth equals happiness. He said that the love should be the reward. And as you might expect when confronted with this information of peace and love and transcending wealth, the director absolutely went ballistic at Glover, and he even speculates that this is why he was given such a lowball offer to return in the sequel and was effectively forced out of the franchise. Ouch. Halle Berry, Catwoman. You have to hand it to Halle Berry. She took this particular disaster like a champ. Catwoman came before the modern superhero boom and accordingly was not a sure thing in terms of box office. But Catwoman didn't just bomb, it failed spectacularly. A colossal failure both critically and commercially. No one came out unscathed, but first in the firing line was Halle Berry, only a few years removed from her Oscar win for Monsters Ball. Her performance was rightly reviled and she went on to win the Golden Raspberry Award for the Worst Actress of the Year. To her credit, not only did she show up to the ceremony, but she made light of the whole mess with a faux emotional speech in which she thanked Warner Brothers for casting her in such a dreadful film. As many actors in similar positions find, the money definitely helped. Berry is still happy to talk about and make fun of Catwoman to this day, and with a career like hers, there's no reason for her to feel ashamed of a disastrous project, even one on this monumental scale.
and Hathaway The Witches. The Witches may not have been a full-blown terrifying horror picture, but it is still a movie that blends together elements of horror, fantasy, and comedy. The second adaptation of Roald Dahl's 1983 novel of the same name, The Witches sees an orphan boy move in with his grandmother and discover that witches are in fact real, as shown by him soon coming face to face with the Grand High Witch. In this iteration of The Witches, it's Academy Award winner Anne Hathaway in the Grand High Witch role, a role for which special effects were used to give the character 3 fingers on each hand. Since the film's release, Hathaway has moved to apologise for her performance in The Witches after she was criticised for how limb differences were utilised as a tool to make her character somehow seem more evil and scary. Taking to Instagram, the actress said, quote, "I have recently learned that many people with limb differences, especially children, are in pain because of the portrayal of the Grand High Witch in The Witches. As someone who really believes in inclusivity and really detests cruelty, I owe you all an apology for the pain caused. I am sorry, I did not connect limb differences with the GHW when the look of the character was brought to me. If I had, I assure you this would never have happened." End quote.
Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique in Dark Phoenix. There was a time when Jennifer Lawrence was one of the hottest names in Hollywood. Around the same time she burst onto the scene in the Hunger Games franchise, she also joined the X-Men series and became one of the highest paid female actors in the industry. However, she soon felt that the world turned on her, and in her own words to Vanity Fair, felt that people were displeased by her mere existence. In an effort to please as many people as possible, she kept working and ended up putting out several performances that she felt were below par in terms of quality. At the time, Lawrence's last 4 major roles were in Passengers, Mother, Red Sparrow, and Dark Phoenix. Though none of these movies set the world on fire critically or commercially, it is the latter that Lawrence received the most amount of flack for. "I was not pumping out the quality that I should have," she told Vanity Fair. For many years, she made it clear she wasn't happy with her role as Mystique, mainly thanks to the hours required in the makeup chair. In Dark Phoenix, she was finally given the release of her character's death. It's a shame, but her disillusion with the role was clear for all to see, including herself.
Ben Affleck hated Armageddon's main plot hole. Pretty much everyone who has ever watched Michael Bay's Armageddon has had the same issue with the film's core premise. A team of oil drillers are given a crash course in Astronaut 101 and sent into space to save the world from an impending asteroid. It's ridiculous, but also, it is actually ridiculous, because wouldn't it be easier to train a team of astronauts to be drillers instead? Hilariously, this was also a concern shared by star Ben Affleck, who held nothing back on the movie's commentary track, where he outlines that he raised the concern to Bay himself, who simply told him to shut the f*** up. Given that this is the setup around which the rest of the movie revolves, it's a major dramatic hurdle for audiences to get over, and one that Affleck himself clearly wasn't satisfied with. Tim Roth, United Passions. So all of us have had pretty crappy jobs in our times, but few of us have ended up shilling for a corrupt sporting official. A job's a job and all, but Tim Roth's role as a deposed FIFA president in United Passions is a resume lowlight. Roth stated in a 2015 interview that he was in a financial hole when he took the role, and has done everything he can to distance himself from the inevitable fallout. He is yet to see the film, which is true for most people to be fair, and offered an apology for having anything to do with the whole mess. He went so far as to say that his father would be turning in his grave for having anything to do with glorifying a man like Blatter. United Passions' box office receipts must have been music to Roth's ears. It didn't even clear the $200,000 mark. Hopefully the work managed to ease the monetary worries, because he won't be wanting to do something as shameful as this ever again.
Jennifer Aniston, Leprechaun. Every actor has to get their start somewhere, and for Jennifer Aniston, that start came back in 1993's Leprechaun. Rather than quipping wise, drinking coffee, and influencing millions of people across the globe with her hairdo though, Leprechaun found an Aniston who was vastly different to the Friends megastar that she'd go on to become. In Mark Jones's Leprechaun, Aniston's Tori finds herself tormented by Warwick Davis's titular creature on the O'Grady farmhouse she and her father are renting. And for the future Friends favourite, reflecting back on her performance in this 93 offering makes her simply cringe. As Aniston told Howard Stern in 2019 via People, quote, "I watched it like 8 years ago with our mutual friend Justin Theroux for shits and giggles. We were dating, it was one of those things when I tried to get that remote out of his hand and there was just no having it. He was like, no, this is happening, and I just kept walking in and out cringing," end quote. While her own performance in Leprechaun is tough to watch for Jennifer Aniston, she also described the movie as a cult classic that at the time made her feel like she'd made it in Hollywood.
Judi Dench as Old Deuteronomy in Cats. When it comes to movies, there will always be differences in opinion. The world would be boring if everyone was the same, as it would be if no one ever disagreed. The same theory applies in Hollywood. However, there are some things that bring just about everybody together, and you could argue that the closest you can get to a universal opinion on a movie in recent years is that nobody enjoyed Cats. Tom Hooper's efforts is one of the most infamous flops in decades, and unsurprisingly cleaned up at the Razzies. Even the stars of the show struggled to defend it. James Corden never even saw it after reading the reviews, and although she was thought to have been the best part of the whole thing, Judi Dench was simply appalled with how she looked on the screen. The actor who played Old Deuteronomy told Vogue that she expected to look elegant, but ended up looking like a battered, mangy old cat and a great big orange bruiser. The CGI in the movie and the bizarre human-cat hybrid aesthetic was impossible to ignore, even for Dame Judi.
Kristen Wiig hated Bridesmaids' diarrhea scene. By far the most iconic and unforgettable scene in the 2011 hit rom-com Bridesmaids occurs when the principal characters all become stricken with food poisoning, leading to Megan stinking up the sink with explosive diarrhea. But star Kristen Wiig, who also co-wrote the film and received a Best Original Screenplay Oscar nomination for her work, didn't include the scene in the initial script, and only begrudgingly added it after, air quotes, encouragement from the studio. She said, "The scene in Bridesmaids was not our idea, and it was not in the original script, and we didn't love it. It was strongly suggested for us to put it in there. I didn't want to see people shitting and puking." It actually sparked a wider debate on the role of female comedians having to act in gross-out scenes like this for a wider comic appeal, and Wiig stated, "When people say, oh, we're going to give more female-centered movies a chance, you're not actually reading the fine print, which is, oh, but they have to be like this. They want to see women acting like guys." And apparently guys shit in sinks. Who knew, right? Mark Wahlberg, The Happening. No stranger to making rash comments, Mark Wahlberg barely waited for the dust to settle on The Happening before publicly bashing it. The M. Night Shyamalan disaster about evil trees was destined for failure from the off, but Wahlberg went in 2 feet first before the body was even cold. At a press conference for The Fighter, Wahlberg confirmed that he only took on The Happening to work with Amy Adams, who smartly managed to remove herself from the project before filming began. Adams dodged the bullet, as he went on to say. Given Marky Mark's often questionable quality control, it must have taken a lot for him to truly regret a job. He admits that he took the role in The Happening because he got the chance to play a science teacher rather than the usual line of coppers, criminals, or a permanently scowling soldier. It didn't work out, clearly. There's no shame in taking risks that don't pay off, but an actor like Wahlberg may be best advised to stick to what he does best.
Tom Hanks' He Knows You're Alone. Released in 1980, He Knows You're Alone is as formulaic a slasher movie as you can pretty much get. Clearly jumping on the slasher bandwagon that had been kickstarted with John Carpenter's legendary Halloween, this effort features a paper-thin plot that's painfully predictable. For Tom Hanks, he had the supporting role of Elliot, a psychology student. However, Elliot was that small a character in the film that his fate wasn't actually ever in question, with him surviving the movie and not even getting close to being in the crosshairs of this picture's bride-killing protagonist, Ray. During an appearance on the David Letterman show, Hanks mocked his involvement in He Knows You're Alone, with this early career role being one he'd clearly rather forget. He said, quote, "I played a guy in this movie. I always said, if this was Gilligan's Island, I would play the professor. It was that bad," end quote. Hanks would go on to laugh off the movie with Letterman, poking fun at the cliched tropes of the slasher subgenre and talking about how at that point the vast majority of his career was not made up of big-time films.
Dave Bautista as Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. If Guardians of the Galaxy was the most unexpected hit in the entire MCU, you could argue that Dave Bautista's Drax was the most unexpected hit of the movie itself. Nobody could have predicted such a successful jump to Hollywood for the former World Heavyweight Champion. From Volume 2 onwards, Drax was no longer the stoic hero as he was in the first movie, but was instead almost exclusively used for comedic relief. It feels as though Bautista was a victim of his own comedy chops. He was so funny that he was essentially pigeonholed into doing little else in the franchise. As Guardians 3 came around, fans were gutted to see the end of this iteration of the team, but Bautista himself couldn't wait to get away. The actor told GQ that it was a relief to see the back of the silly role, as he wanted to move on to more dramatic work. It's understandable to want to branch out into other things, but hammering the entire role like this feels a little unfair.
Molly Ringwald hated The Breakfast Club's casual misogyny. While John Hughes's The Breakfast Club is an undisputed classic of 80s coming-of-age cinema, it's not one that holds up to contemporary scrutiny, not least from those who actually appeared in the movie, such as Molly Ringwald, who actually wrote an article about The Breakfast Club and its treatment of Claire. She described the presentation of the character troubling and drew specific attention to several scenes where rebel John Bender harasses Claire, such as infamously peeping up her skirt. She said, "As I can see now, Bender sexually harasses Claire throughout the film. When he's not sexualizing her, he takes out his rage on her with vicious contempt, calling her pathetic, mocking her as Queenie. It's rejection that inspires his vitriol." Ringwald then added, "It's hard for me to understand how John was able to write with so much sensitivity and also have such a glaring blind spot. How are we meant to feel about art that we both love and oppose?" And you know what? She's got an incredibly valid point. Not all media ages well when examined under the lenses of today's current society. As art, it's okay to respect its legacy, but to see issues with it is also valid because it shows how we're progressing as a society.
Emilia Clarke, Terminator, Ice. Throughout its history, the Terminator franchise has made for an unforgiving workspace. From the dictatorship that was the direction of James Cameron to the volatile temper of Christian Bale, each installment of the sci-fi franchise has seemed like a pretty trying place to ply your trade. Things were no different on 2015's dreadfully titled Terminator Ice, whose star Emilia Clarke openly stated that the film's relative financial failure was actually a relief to her, as it guaranteed any sort of sequel would be scrapped. She didn't go into much detail as to the specific discomforts, but reading between the lines, it sounds as though studio interference was a major concern. Director Alan Taylor, with whom Clarke had worked on Game of Thrones, was eaten and chewed up during production, per Clarke's statements. She went on to say that no one had a good time and that a sense of joylessness pervades the fifth installment of the franchise, which itself is an exercise in mediocrity. A film set is a place of work and doesn't have to be fun, but when it's this aggressively unfun, it tends to seep into the finished product.
Heather Donahue, The Blair Witch Project. The case of the Blair Witch Project's Heather Donahue is a rather unique one when compared to the rest of the entries on this list. While Heather enjoyed the making of the Blair Witch Project and is proud of the job that all involved did, it's the fallout from her performance that troubled the actress. Speaking to GQ in 2016, Donahue revealed her performance in that revolutionary found footage offering led to her struggling to find work. Using her real name of Heather Donahue for her Blair Witch character, Heather revealed how some wouldn't hire her because they thought she was, quote, that annoying bitch from the film, while others believed the Blair Witch Project's narrative that Heather really was presumed dead. So yeah, you can kind of see where she's coming from here. She clearly really enjoys the movie, but is a little bit resentful of how much aggro it caused her in the later years.
John Boyega as Finn in Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. The Star Wars sequel trilogy was a turbulent time for Lucasfilm, to say the least. If 3 movies can make fans reevaluate and appreciate the prequels the way they have, then you know it's bad. The clear disconnect between the movies meant that both The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker were received incredibly poorly by fans. But it wasn't just the paying customers that were pissed off. Mark Hamill was famously vocal over his disapproval of Luke Skywalker's arc in Episode 8, as was John Boyega post Rise of Skywalker. The disconnect between the movies meant that the likes of Rose were all but forgotten in the threequel, and John Boyega felt that Finn suffered a similar fate. Particularly when compared to what Rey and Poe had to do in Episode 9, Boyega was extremely unhappy. In an interview with GQ, he slammed Disney for building up diverse characters to be more important than they actually were, only to toss them to the side in Episode 9 when they had nothing for them to do.
Sam Worthington hated Terminator Salvation's suspiciously quiet Terminator. It's fair to say that basically nobody involved in the 4th Terminator movie, Terminator Salvation, was happy with how it turned out. But star Sam Worthington actually went into specifics about the blockbuster's failings mere months after its 2009 release. Amongst issues with the film just being plain old boring, many fans noted the absolute silliness of the gigantic harvester robot being able to sneak up on humans at the gas station. Even if you accept that it could sneak quietly, its sheer size would cause the ground to shake, right? It's pretty dumb. And hilariously, Worthington himself raised the plot hole in an interview. He said, if there was a big 10-ton robot coming outside that gas station, surely we would hear it, and I missed that, so I gotta be more careful when I'm looking through my scripts. So that kind of raises my game a bit, because I feel like an idiot for not saying it to MCG. Jesus, so we've had robots getting a bashing here and the Terminator 2 thumbs up scene. Can the Terminator series catch a break?
Tim Rose, Star Wars: The Last Jedi. But one surprisingly unhappy voice was Tim Rose, who is best known for puppeteering the ever-memeable Admiral Akbar. Rose has portrayed the character for some 40 years, so it's understandable that he grew pretty attached to the role,
role and his part in the historic series. His criticisms, though, seem a little strong. He feels that his character was disrespected and that he was expecting Akbar to play a more pivotal role in the epic finale. While his disappointment is understandable, it seems a little odd that Rose would imagine the character would suddenly become integral to the final throes of the series. Akbar was never a major player. He's an alien with a catchphrase. He spoke in an interview of crying in the suit because he was so upset with the character's treatment. Clearly, he was very invested.
Anya Taylor-Joy, The Witch. From director Robert Eggers, 2015's The Witch is a movie that stands out as something of a modern cult classic. A 1630s set supernatural horror picture about a Puritan family engulfed by a looming large presence of evil. Eggers' directorial debut won plentiful praise from fans and critics alike, picking up numerous awards and managing to take home a cool $40 million box office haul against its $4 million budget. For star Anya Taylor-Joy in what was her movie debut, she was left quote-unquote devastated after watching The Witch for the first time. As the actress told IndieWire, her first watch of The Witch took place shortly before the film premiered at Cannes Film Festival in January 2015. She said, quote, "The director, Rob Eggers, showed us the film maybe 2 hours before the audience screening, and I was devastated. I thought I'd never work again. I still get shivers thinking about it. It was just the worst feeling of, I have let down the people I love most in the world. I didn't do it right. And I'm quite verbose. I like to talk, I like to communicate, but I did not talk. I just cried," end quote.
Michael Shannon as Zod in The Flash. It's hard to know how to feel about the release of The Flash. The development hell, the off-screen issues with Ezra Miller, and the apparent end to Zack Snyder's DCEU are complicated factors. But on the other hand, there are some excellent aspects to the movie as well. While everyone is understandably excited to see the return of Michael Keaton's Batman, there's also Michael Shannon's first appearance as Zod since Man of Steel a decade ago. Of course, the villain was murdered by Superman at the end of the DCEU's curtain raiser, but is able to return thanks to the exploration of the multiverse. Michael Shannon has already spoken about how his time on the Flash set was incredibly different to that of Man of Steel, but the character itself has lost significance to the actor as well. This is, ironically, also thanks to the exploration of the multiverse. As he told Collider, Shannon had a deep connection to the character and the overall sophisticated story of Man of Steel. However, being brought back into a multiverse setting with the Flash felt to him more like someone playing with action figures, putting characters randomly together to fight. Whenever a dead character returns, their story does tend to feel somewhat diminished, so it's hard to disagree with him on this one.
Megan Fox, Transformers. When it comes to burning your professional bridges, Megan Fox took the nuclear option. Now, there are some things you can walk back from, but comparing your director Michael Bay to Hitler is probably not one of them. Fox's star was on the rise by the time that she was cast in Transformers, but the blockbuster feature-length toy advert catapulted her to the A-list. By her own admission, the success was far too much and far too soon for the then 21-year-old. She described the experience as a breakdown and notably shied away from projects of that scale in the aftermath. While Fox has never gone into specifics of Bay's behaviour, this was clearly a dark time in her life, and one which she has only begun to speak about publicly as of late. Bay's response was to bristle and offer a sarcastic apology. 3 crew members of the film wrote a creepily sexist letter in which Bay, in a misguided moment, posted briefly on his website. Luckily, these days seem to be behind Fox now, who has settled down and is approaching the industry at her own pace. And the most important thing is that at least she's been able to move on.
Yahya Abdul-Mateen II as Black Manta in Aquaman. Comic book movies have typically found a strong balance between big-name and lesser-known actors. The MCU alone has turned many of the latter into the former, but the DCEU has typically leaned towards more well-known faces. Joining the likes of Ben Affleck, Margot Robbie, Idris Elba and more in the franchise was Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. The actor has a long list of impressive roles from Watchmen to the Trial of the Chicago 7, but his most famous was as Black Manta in 2018's Aquaman. As something of a secondary villain behind Patrick Wilson's Orm, the actor brought a lot to the role, but has since spoken out against it. Bautista called Drax silly, but that may not seem quite so harsh compared to Abdul-Mateen II's words about Aquaman. The actor told Vulture that working on these types of movies and in these types of roles is clown work, which feels rather condescending to the entire genre.
Jessica Alba hated her crying scenes in Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. Now here's the thing, no one would actually blame Jessica Alba for forgetting some of her time with the Fantastic Four, seeing as those films were at best forgettable themselves. However, there was one moment that she does seem to remember, and that was when Sue Storm had to cry in the 2007 sequel prequel Rise of the Silver Surfer, and she remembered absolutely hating that moment. Alba said at that point that she was experiencing a clash with the director. "I wanted to stop acting. The director was like, it looks too real, it looks too painful. Can you be prettier when you cry? Cry pretty, Jessica." He was like, "Don't do that thing with your face, just make it flat. We can CGI the tears in." And I'm like, "But there's no connection to a human being." So I just said, "Kid, I don't care about this business anymore." As if a movie cynically adding digital tears wasn't insulting enough, dismissing a woman's performed emotional response as too ugly is absolutely foul. Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart, Twilight. The careers of the stars of the Twilight saga seem a direct response to the dreadful time that they had acting in the adaptation of Stephenie Meyer's young adult series. Both are now bona fide art house stalwarts, and while they'll treat themselves to the odd blockbuster, cough cough Batman, they've made an effort to distance themselves from the series that made them household names. Now the pair have been taking shots at the franchise, its plot holes, its wild fans, and the quality of their own acting pretty much since the first film came out. In interviews and on TV, they could just not hide their negativity. But their misanthropy reached its peak on the DVD commentary for the first film, in which the actors, Pattinson particularly, takes pot shots at the movie for the entire runtime. Now it's good-spirited, he mainly cracks wise at his own expense, but clearly there's an element of regret for both performers. Both have freed themselves from Twilight's shadow, and their disgust seems to have been tempered into amusement. But had their careers not gone so well, odds are you'd have two bitter former teen heartthrobs on your hands.
Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda Maximoff in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Phase 4 hasn't been particularly kind to Marvel Studios, with the likes of No Way Home and Shang-Chi being diamonds in more rough than the franchise is used to. One of the undeniable highlights of the post-Endgame MCU, however, has been Elizabeth Olsen's Wanda Maximoff. The Scarlet Witch kicked off Phase 4 with the utterly compelling WandaVision before transitioning into the villain and arguably best part of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. But despite having a lot to do, Olsen wasn't completely satisfied with every aspect of the role. While some actors like Tom Cruise take pride in the fact that they do their own stunts, this isn't an outlook shared by Olsen. As far as she's concerned, there's a professional stunt team on set for a reason, and in a chat with Stephen Colbert, she lamented the fact that one particular stunt didn't turn out so great because she was forced to do it herself. She said, "There's a stunt in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness where I had to be dropped from 30 feet up and land. They wanted to drop me pretty quickly, so it looked like it had an impact, but I kept landing like Peter Pan. I was like, just use the double. There is a double for a reason." She added that the moment looks ridiculous in the final movie, and it does make you wonder why the stunt team wasn't used if she was having so much difficulty herself.
Holt McCallany hated how his Justice League scene was re-edited. Justice League's production was a big old mess, that much is no secret. However, as it stands right now, most of the A-list cast have kept relatively quiet about the movie and offered up only diplomatic responses. Well, thank God then for Holt, who wasn't so quiet about his disposal by Batman in the opening of the film. In a post-release interview, the actor confirmed that this scene was significantly rejigged in the editing room and ended up far away from its scripted intent. He said this, "I love director Joss Whedon. My scene with Batman was originally conceived as a comedic scene. That's how Joss wrote it, and that's how we shot it. I thought it came out great, but the studio felt it would be a mistake to open the film with a completely comedic scene, so it was re-edited a little bit. I was disappointed, but when I got home to New York, I found a bottle of my favorite champagne and a note from Joss that said, 'To battles lost, gratefully Joss.' I can't tell you how much it meant to me that he took the time to write. Joss Whedon is a class act," and had the letter framed. David Cross, Alvin and the Chipmunks, Chipwrecked. Now, sometimes when an actor hates a movie, an interviewer will strive to coax the negative comments out of them, but that wasn't necessary with David Cross. The comedian wasted little time in firing shots at the franchise at a press conference for an entirely different project. Cross described the final film of the trilogy as, without question, the most unpleasant experience I've ever had in my professional life. No doubt the project was lacking in artistic merit, but it seems that there was more to it than simple creative differences, with Cross stopping just short of naming the individuals who made the process so unpleasant. It's worth remembering that this was Cross's third film in the Chipmunk saga, so it's tough to be too sympathetic for somebody who clearly didn't learn his lesson the first 2 times, but the final film was evidently a particularly distressing experience. The money no doubt helped, but for a comic like Cross to be taking a job like this must have been unpleasant enough without a toxic working environment to contend with as well.